Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our brand new study in Borden Parker Bowne's Principles of Ethics. We've looked at his metaphysics, now we're going to take a look at his ethics, and it's only a 300-page manuscript, but we'll take it in small sections, and with the metaphysics as our foundation, we should have a pretty good advent into this study on Bowne's ethics. We're going to begin with Chapter 1, the introduction, pages 1 to 20. Let's take a look at Block 1 and take a look at the methodology. Bowne says that we rationalize moral experience by passing behind the instinctive form and defining the underlying principle of ethics. Moral life is the analog of the mental life, so our analysis must reduce discord and detect the implicit principle at work. We seek to define the theoretical ethical theory. We're seeking to define the theoretical side. We're seeking to define ethical theory. Under validity of ethical ideas are valid based on the evidence that appeals to mind. Rational ideas are conditioned by sensation, and they are evidence of an order of a manifested experience. Ethical order is present in experience, says Bowne. Sensation is a mental state. It's a phase of sensibility. It is a shadow of the law of identity. But fundamentally, there is a ethical order to existence. So, categorical principles and conceptual ideas equal an ethical developing purpose in experience. Anything subject to developing must address teleology and oughtness. We ask, how does brute sensation transcend itself? The materialist formal law of identity must be negated because universality is simply class term. So right off at the very first moment here, he tells us at the beginning of the book that we're going to be looking at a ethics that is eschatological. We're going to look at an ethics that is a teleology. That's the first thing we learn from Bowne, that ethics is going to be a teleology. It's going to be a process, and it is a process that will enclose categories and concepts, just like Hegel. We already knew that from metaphysics, but it's going to be a teleology that will enclose categories and concepts. From here we'll move on to Block 2 and take a look at the holistic life of the ethical life. He begins with 3 axioms. The deduction of moral ideas from non-moral data is a fiction. Reducing moral ideas to non-moral elements is a fiction. Development of moral life is due to successive manifestation of an immanent principle or immanent law. We rely on reason. The theory of innate ideas of truth must be negated. Mental insight must be the final court of appeal concerning ethical theory, and all ethical action encloses 2 aims: to secure happiness and to attain inward worth. Those must be kept in balance. Happiness depends upon the physical, social, and psychological principles. Inward worth depends on that attitude toward ideal concerning life and action. Again, a teleology, an outlook toward an ideal teleology. So axioms plus rational trustworthiness equals a holistic view of life. It must synthesize happiness and ideal worth. The innermost essence of morality is the holy will and character. And then key, Bowne says ethical life must adjust to the inner ideal and conform to the outer world laws. Both must be kept in balance. Both must be kept in balance. The practical consciousness, or phronesis, is the raw material of ethical theory. We formulate principles that will underlie ethical practice that will assist us in understanding life. Ethics is the speculative desire for unity of knowledge and unity of practical application of that knowledge. He concludes in this introductory section by telling us that we're going to be looking at a critical, systematic, eschatological look at ethics. It's going to be critical, it's going to be systematic, it's going to be a teleology. But in Block 3, he says there are 16 areas of raw material that we have to consider. There are these 16 areas of raw material that have to be considered when we construct a systematic and critical ethical view. And so they're broken down into 4 categories. You've got ego and altruism. There's a school of virtue, which focuses on inner worth. The school of happiness, where pleasure is the end of action. The egoistic, welfare is supreme aim. And then the benevolent, the good of others is supreme aim. Now under causality, intuitional, the mind intuitively grasps principles. The empirical, the mind learns from experience. Intentionality, morality is attributed to motive. Consequence, morality is independent of the doer and motive. And then the third category is freedom and metaphysics. Schleiermacher, freedom has no significance for ethics. Kant, ethics depends on freedom. The independent view, ethics is not related to metaphysics. The dependent view, ethics depends on metaphysics. And then under the category of necessity or influence, there's a religious, ethics has a religious character. There's necessity, ethics is a result of antecedents. There's the biological, ethics is due to automatic human movement. And there's the critical systematic view, that is Bowne's view. There's a critical systematic view. Ethics is built up into system through the critical study of all of the above schools of thought. So all 15 areas have to be considered critically and dynamically, because it is going to be system, it is going to be teleology, or eschatology if you prefer. But it's a critical method which will critique the 15 schools of thought before we had that 16th as the critical systematic view. And we're going to be looking at the critical systematic view concerning Bowne. We know from his metaphysics it's a version of Hegel, but with greater clarity. We already know from his metaphysics that it's a version of Hegel, but with a greater clarity, and it'll center on personality, obviously. We learned that in metaphysics. But he gives us a great introduction. We get his methodology of a teleology that will enclose categories and concepts. It's a holistic view. It is a speculative desire for unity. And we have 15 areas of schools of thought that must be critically examined when forming this system of ethical theory. So we get a lot of great content in the introduction that we really do need to do a proper job on examining this great Christian ethics. Remember, Borden Parker Bowne is a Methodist theologian. He is a teacher of Christian living religion, Christianity as living religion, and an ethics that is a Christ-centered living ethics. That's Bowne's position as a Methodist theologian. But he looks at it from the point of view of philosophy. He is a profound American philosopher, and he was Brightman's teacher. He founded Boston Personalism. So we get a great chance now to look at his Christian ethics the ethics of the living religion of Christianity. Christianity is the living religion, and we're going to look at an ethics that is truly eschatological in nature, and it's going to be systematic and critical, and it will be related to metaphysics. We've already looked at it as metaphysics. We have a great, you can always go back to that comprehensive lesson, and we gave the overview of his phenomenology, and just kind of use that as a reference as we go through his ethics, and you'll have that foundation ready and at hand to assist you. Because remember, it brought up the factors, and then the notions of the true, and then the causal units, and then the dialectic of realization moving through the realm of positing, and that return of state of mind. We know his metaphysics. We know Bowne's metaphysics. That's a great plus as we begin this study of his Christian ethics. We already know his metaphysics of what? Phenomenology, cosmology, and psychology. It had three parts. We had the theoretical phenomenology, the outgoing cosmology that passed through the realm of positing, and the return moment of state of mind, where we grow in our maturity as believers. We grow in our understanding of Christ and the notions of the kingdom of Christ. Now we get to move on, having understood that foundational metaphysics, we get to move on and examine a 300-page document that presents Bowne's Christian ethics from a theoretical point of view. He says we're going to take up theory, we're going to take up the theoretical. It's going to be speculative. It's a speculative desire for unity, a speculative desire for unity within God's kingdom and within Christ. So we get a great introduction that concludes with raw material. So it's the introduction. He says, here's the material we're going to work with. We've got 15 areas to examine critically that can make authentic contributions, but going exclusively with any one of them is a distortion. So we will look at all 15 schools of thought, and then gathering from those 15 schools of thought in a critical living religion critique, we can form an eschatological, systematic Christian ethics. So this is the introduction, pages 1 to 20. We've got a beautiful beginning on Principles of Ethics by Borden Parker Bowne. We'll pick up next time with Chapter 2.